Hey everyone, subscribe to my channel right now. The instant my mom's wine glass crashed at my feet, I understood that love in our home always carried a bill attached. You've been draining this family since you walked out, she snapped, right in front of the whole group. Forks hovered in midair. My brother Julian fixed his gaze on the table. No one uttered a word. I didn't wince. I didn't plead. I simply met her eyes and replied, "No, Mom. I just quit expecting you to sacrifice for me. My name is Fidelis Hargrave." And that was the evening my own relatives chose to judge me for the offense of creating a life apart from them. The sun dipped low above Charleston, casting gold over my mother's yard. The aroma of barbecued meat mixed with the fragrance of her roses, and for a moment, I nearly convinced myself we remained a family. Julian held court on the patio, spinning his newest success tale, and the crowd chuckled a bit too forcefully, as if forcing the falsehood to ring true. My mother, Miriam, refilled her wine and chirped cheerfully, "Your brother's restoring the family legacy. Isn't that marvelous?" I nodded, offering a polite smile, the sort you give when folks confuse sympathy with affection. A cousin leaned in, tipsy and intrigued. "So, you're still constructing things?" "Still," I replied. "But these days, they rise a little higher." The chuckles faded. The atmosphere grew heavy. Even the jazz drifting from her speakers seemed uneasy. I reached into my bag, drew out the brown envelope, and placed it on the wooden table. "That's the deed for Riverside Avenue," I announced. "The house has returned to us at last." My mother's expression changed. First shock, then something fiercer. The glass tumbled from her grip and broke. "You've been draining this family dry since the day you left." Quiet engulfed the yard. Julian stared at his plate. No one stirred. I locked eyes with her, steady as the smoke drifting between us. "No, Mom," I murmured gently. "I just stopped expecting you to sacrifice for me." The words hit harder than the glass. In that hush, love fractured, and the echo lingered forever. The clang of steel was the initial sound that ever brought me comfort. Back then, I was 16, lost in quiet after my father's burial, clad in a safety vest that draped my shoulders like borrowed courage from someone bolder. The shipyard workers dubbed me Kid, and chuckled when I struggled to hoist the brush for scraping rust from a hull. One grinned, "You've got more determination than half these guys." I smiled despite the blood beating on my knuckles. Pain proved I fit in somewhere. At night, I'd doze in a truck cab parked by the Cooper River. Textbooks played across my knees. The radio cautioned of another storm approaching, wind shaking the glass. I gazed at the dark water and murmured, "Then I'll create something that endures." I didn't realize it then, but that phrase would shape my entire existence. Years on, as I drove back into Charleston, I paused outside the Riverside house, the one I'd battled to recover. Paint flaked, shutters drooped, but sunlight pierced a fractured pane. I stood there, recalling the father who instilled resilience and the mother who denied it. I'd wired her funds once to cover the mortgage. She never thanked me. When I reviewed the ancient bank logs, I spotted her signature on a withdrawal from the very account I'd used to rescue her. She'd emptied it. That's when the first bit of love corroded. I departed home because lingering meant sinking. But nobody warns you the world beyond isn't gentler. It merely shows you how to float. Monday mornings were meant to be serene. Coffee, radio murmur, the ease of being alone. But that morning, the knock at my door rang like an alarm. On the steps sat a bulky manila envelope, the type that delivers unwelcome tidings. Stamped across the top, Charleston County Court, Civil Case, NR 04739. And below, Plaintiffs Miriam and Julian Hargrave. I laughed once, a harsh rasp stuck in my throat. Then tears pricked my eyes. Inside lay the complaint. My own mother and brother suing me for improper seizure of family assets. They sought the Riverside house returned, every cent of it, right down to the savings I'd scraped up alone. The sum they claimed equaled my down payment. They weren't after fairness. They aimed to dismantle me. They're suing me for repurchasing what they let slip away. I phoned my mother. No reply. Phoned again. Voicemail. So I recorded a message. My tone even, though my hands quivered. "If this is what family means to you," I stated, then I finally grasped why Dad constructed bridges, not barriers. I ended the call before my voice could break. Outside, rain streamed down the pane like liquid glass, and the cactus on my kitchen sill stood pointed and undisturbed. They launched the suit to school me. I'm just unsure they grasped the lesson. 2 weeks after the envelope, I faced Leah Grant in her downtown office, rain drumming the window. She rifled through my pile of folders with exacting care, her polished nails tapping the sheets. They filed under heritage property law, she stated bluntly. It's emotional coercion disguised as documents. The phrase struck like metal. Leah leaned back, gaze keen behind her lenses. Collect it all, every job, every cent. They demand evidence. We'll bury them in it. That night, I headed to the technical library where my father once toiled. The familiar scent of dust and machine oil lingered. The elderly librarian knew me, his tone warm yet cautious. Your dad's files remain here, he said, pulling a faded gray box marked Hargrave. Inside lay yellowed bridge sketches. I uncovered a sealed envelope labeled for my children. My hands trembled as I unsealed it. My father's script flowed firm and assured. Julian will inherit the family name. Fidelis will inherit the will to build. Never let guilt become your language of love. The sentence sliced through 14 years of quiet. I clutched the page to my heart and allowed tears to fall. Not from frailty, but because someone had finally affirmed my value. Later, back at my place, I accessed the family's old bank account. An entry flashed, the insurance payout withdrawn long ago under the signature F. Hargrave. My name faked by my mother's hand. She hadn't merely taken funds. She'd taken honesty. I spread the documents across my handmade table. The one crafted from discount lumber and resolve. Lamplight cast the files as a war plan. If they want to battle me with paper, I resolved I'll ensure the paper wounds deeply. When Leah phoned again, her voice was firm. They used blood to bind you. Then I'll use proof, I replied. To unbind myself. The rain outside pounded fiercer, and for the first time, I didn't recoil from the noise. It evoked steel being shaped. A month into the case, my apartment had become a stronghold of proof. Walls stacked with boxes, each tagged by years, receipts, pay stubs. Leah paused in the doorway, arms folded. If proof were bricks, she remarked. You've built yourself a fortress. I grinned, adding another folder to the stack. A house made of facts. Let's see who can topple it. Days melted into nights. The scanners were a soothing rhythm. Then, in a dusty box behind ancient blueprints, I discovered my father's slim leather notebook. On the final page, in dim pencil, he'd inscribed, "Debt forgiven to Fidelis." She owes me nothing. The words quivered in my grasp. Love didn't require witnesses, but now it had one. Leah's digging delivered the next strike. Julian, my shining brother, the family savior, had squandered it all in a crypto crash. $186,000. Vanished. Worse, he'd faked reports to hide it from my mother. I stared at the printout, figures blurring. He was handed everything, I breathed, and it still fell short. That evening, an email from my mother landed. You can still halt this. Drop the house and we'll erase everything, I responded. I already erased the day you quit being my family by filing that suit. Then send it without pause. Leah dropped by later with takeout and her recorder tucked in her bag, set for the next step. We practiced my testimony until my voice steadied. When I finally strode the courthouse corridor for the initial pretrial session, the gleaming floor mirrored the harsh lights like flowing steel. Each footfall rang with determination. They had their heritage. I had the will to build, and this time I wasn't building solo. Monday morning arrived thick with hush. The courthouse carried scents of dust and oak polish, the sort that sticks to history and verdicts. I stood next to Leah as the bailiff announced the case. Hargrave versus Hargrave. Judge Ellen Worthington recited clearly, her tone resolute yet fair. A family matter and a grave one. My mother perched 2 rows away, her pearls shining under the courtroom lamps. She avoided my gaze. Julian sat beside her, head lowered like a boy trapped in another's deceit. Victor Ashcombe, my father's old ally and now their lawyer, stood first. His voice was smooth, practiced. This is not about greed. Your Honor, he started. It's about heritage and respect. A daughter seized what was never intended for her. My mother's hand shook theatrically on Julian's arm. I could nearly hear the pity she craved for the room. Leah rose next, composed, precise. We will prove that what Miss Hargrave built was hers, paid by her, earned by her, and blessed by her father's own hand. The room hushed. Even the judge tilted forward a touch. Then came the first strike. Ashcombe slid an aged photo over the table. My father with both of us as kids. She was always jealous, he claimed. Leah didn't blink. She raised a single sheet instead. The letter my father penned. Judge Worthington read it aloud, her voice slicing the air. Julian will inherit the family name. Fidelis will inherit the will to build. My mother's face lost all color. They pushed forward, charging me with siphoning family accounts. I passed Leah my evidence. Years of pay stubs, bank statements, contracts. The judge eyed me straight. Did you ever receive any family aid? Only the kind that arrives as guilt, I answered. Leah's next play shattered any remaining pretense. She played the recording, my mother's voice, brittle and sharp. I couldn't let her win. It would make me look like I failed as a mother. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel. And then came Julian. When they summoned him to testify, he couldn't face me. Did you agree to see your sister? The judge inquired. Mom said it was the only way to protect Dad's legacy. He murmured, Do you believe that? A pause. No, ma'am. The sound of truth shattering was softer than I'd pictured. My mother's tears weren't regret. They were dread. The sort that hits when the tale you've woven begins collapsing in the light. When the judge finally queried, Miss Hargrave, do you have anything else to say? I rose and stated plainly, only that love stops being love when it demands a receipt. The room quieted once more, not from surprise, but from understanding. The next afternoon, the court mandated an inspection of the Riverside house, the battlefield posed as evidence. I showed up with Leah, 2 court officers, and Julian following like a shadow. My mother stayed away. The air inside the house hung heavy with dust and memory. Dad used to keep his ledgers in the cellar, Julian muttered. We ventured into the damp cellar air. My flashlight snagged a metal gleam on a shattered shelf. I grasped it, a wooden box, edges cracked. Inside, an old notebook, pages yellowed but whole. My heart clenched as I flipped to the last page. Inked in pencil, dim but legible. Debt forgiven to Fidelis. She owes me nothing. I couldn't draw breath for an instant. Leah snapped a photo, then another. Proof, not just in ink but in love. I bore the notebook upstairs, set it on the dusty table, and faced Julian. He already gave it back to us. Julian, I said gently. We just didn't know how to keep it. Julian's eyes welled, his lips quivering. He believed in you, he breathed. He always did. By evening, word had spread. My mother collapsed upon hearing of the notebook. Reporters already rang Leah for quotes. Rumor says they might withdraw, one queried over the line. Leah's voice stayed even. They should. There's nothing left to take. When the others departed, I lingered. The sun dropped low, bathing the room in amber glow. I perched on the cellar steps, the notebook open on my lap. My fingers traced the penciled words again. He wrote it in pencil, I murmured, so it could fade but not disappear. I wiped the dust until the letters shimmered faintly in the day's final light. This was never about the house. It was about who could stand inside it without lying. The courtroom shone with morning light filtering through stained glass, gilding the oak walls. It felt more like a haven than a hall of justice. Reporters filled the rear seats. A handful of my coworkers sat silently in support. My mother sat rigid beside her lawyer, her pearls dim under the glow. Julian stared forward, hands gripped tight as if clutching something already lost. Leah rose first, voice firm. The late Mr. Hargrave left one truth, debt forgiven. His daughter honored it not with words, but with work. She laid the notebook, the letter, the recording, and the bank statements before the judge. Each item rippled like a stone in calm water. Judge Worthington nodded deliberately. Ashcombe sighed, facing my mother. Mrs. Hargrave, I advised withdrawal. Her chin rose. No, I can't lose to her. Not my own daughter. The judge read aloud from my father's letter. Fidelis will inherit the will to build. The echo rang like a bell, signaling all that had decayed between us. Julian cracked first, shoulders heaving. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, I stood. And if inheritance is meant to chain me to guilt, then I choose to inherit nothing. I worked for what I own, and I forgive what I can't forget. Judge Worthington struck the gavel 3 times. Case dismissed with malice. The plaintiff will pay all legal fees. This court finds no merit, only manipulation. Outside, the throng burst forth. A daughter sued by her own family and won. Someone yelled. Cameras flashed. As I passed the courthouse steps, sunlight glinted off the silver pen in my hand, the one that had signed my freedom. Family isn't about who inherits. The judge had said, then I guess, I whispered. I'm the last builder standing. 2 months after the verdict, Charleston had fallen still. The clamor of courtrooms and cameras had ebbed, leaving only the hush that compels you to hear your own breathing. One morning, a letter came from the hospital. My mother's handwriting shaky and uneven. I wanted to protect the family name. It said, I forgot you were the family. There was no apology, just that single line. Trembling with what she couldn't say, I folded it once and set it beside my father's photo on the mantel. Some truths didn't need confrontation. They just needed to rest. Julian left town soon after. He didn't call. He only left a note under my door. You were right about Dad. I wasn't ready to build anything, but you did. I tucked it into my wallet, not for comfort, but as proof that maybe he'd finally seen me clearly. By late afternoon, I was back at Riverside, watching sunlight dance across the half-painted walls. Workers bustled around me, their brushes tapping like gentle pulses. I scaled the ladder, dusted the plaque my father once crafted, and rehung it on the front wall. Build what you can't inherit. The light snagged the first word, build, and the room seemed to breathe again. Later, while clearing the study, I found an unopened envelope tucked in an old drawer. My father's writing addressed to my mother. Miriam loved them both. Even when they built different homes, I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Maybe the letters were never meant to be read. Maybe they were meant to remind us that silence, too, can heal. A year later, the backyard of Riverside buzzed with life again. But this time, the air didn't press with judgment. The oak tree spread broader, string lights twinkled like gentle fireflies, and laughter floated across the yard. Smoke rose from the grill, swirling into the pink light of late spring. I carried out a tray of marinated meat, while a few of my students, kids who'd aged out of the foster system and found work through the workshop, hung paper lanterns from the branches. One girl wiped her hands on her jeans and asked, You built this place all by yourself? I smiled. No, I built the part of myself that could. The crowd that evening was a patchwork of neighbors, carpenters, welders, and friends. Family by choice, someone asked. Is this the famous Hargrave house? I laughed. It used to be. Now it's everyone's. I set my old house keys on the same wooden table where everything once fell apart. No one gasped this time. No one whispered. They just raised their glasses, the way people do when peace finally replaces pride. At the edge of the yard, I saw Julian watching from the gate. He didn't come closer, just nodded once before walking away. I nodded back. That was enough. I lifted my glass, the sunset flashing off the steel bridge beyond the yard. Every key I've ever held was earned, not given. And for the first time, family wasn't a word I feared. It was one I'd finally built.